out even more criticism after the U.S. just had a record 1 million new cases in just a day. I want to bring in Florida Congressman Greg Steube. He's also a member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, good morning to you. Let's first start with the CDC. And a joke that I saw on Twitter yesterday that made me laugh. It says the CDC now confirms that Ross and Rachel were indeed on a break. That's where we're at with the CDC.
Yeah, you can't believe any of the information that comes out of there because they flip-flop back and forth. It's like flip-flopping Fauci on the mask. First it was, we don't have to wear masks. And it was, you have to wear a mask. Then it's, now we have mandates when you get on a plane to wear a mask. You have to wear a mask in certain states, but not other states, certain cities, but not other cities. Americans don't know what to do and what not to do and are trying to get on with their lives. You have an American president who said he would end COVID on day one, and he has the most deaths than Trump ever had during his presidency due to COVID.
You know, here's the thing, too, as far as the strategy from the Biden administration. We found out last week in that Vanity Fair report that top officials, health officials, went to the White House back in October and said, we want you to order tests. We think that testing should be increased ahead of the holidays. And what did the Biden administration do? They said no. They focused on vaccinations. Well, now vaccinated Americans are getting COVID in record numbers. Your response?
Yeah, obviously the vaccine is not preventing individuals from getting COVID. And so their push to just push everybody to get vaccinated isn't working because the vaccine doesn't prevent you from getting the virus. So what we should be focused on things that actually help individuals that get it, like the monoclonal antibodies. And the Biden administration is preventing those antibody treatments from being shipped to states like Florida, yet they ship them to blue states like New York, but they're not shipping them to states like Florida. Just this week, Governor DeSantis had asked the federal government to send more monoclonal antibody treatments to Florida so that people that do get COVID can get the treatment that they need.
Well, let me ask you about that, because I have to talk about this controversy. First, you had AOC, my congresswoman here in New York, down in Florida on vacation, maskless, mandate-free Florida. Next thing we see, Eric Swalwell. He is down in Florida. These are two Democratic, your colleagues in the Democratic Party out there in Washington that decide, after screaming about masks and mandates and shutdowns and COVID is the devil, next thing you see them in Florida having a good old time. Your response?
Yeah. Because it's rules for thee, not for me. It's the same thing that we've seen with Speaker Pelosi and ordering masks on the floor of the House, ordering masks and going back and forth on whether masks are required in D.C. And then you get video of them not wearing a mask in D.C. You get video of Biden not wearing a mask in a restaurant in D.C. So it's rules for everybody else, but not for themselves. And so, hey, come to Florida because they know that there's freedom here in Florida. And it's interesting that the Democrats, some of the most leftist, progressive Democrats in the country, are coming to one of the most conservative, freedom-loving states in the union.
Yeah, well, Florida, Texas might get the Super Bowl from California. We talked about that earlier in the show. Let me talk about inflation, though, with you. This is a big story for all Americans. We're at a 40-year high for inflation. The Biden administration only just acknowledged there's a problem with inflation. They've been downplaying these skyrocketing prices for months. In particular, Congresswoman, the biggest offense I found was they're blaming now the meat industry and price collusion and price fixing for inflation, just like they blamed the energy companies, the oil companies, because gas prices were jumping high. What is going on with this absolute, gaslighting and saying it has nothing to do with our policies? It's these evil companies that are causing inflation.
It has everything to do with the Biden administration's and the Democrats' policies. They dropped $11 trillion on the economy before Biden took office. Then they dropped $1.9 trillion in his American Rescue Plan, which hasn't rescued anybody from COVID because we're seeing the highest numbers we've ever seen in our nation's history. And when you dump that amount of money on our economy, any economist will tell you that you're going to see inflation. And then you're going to cut our own domestic production of oil and cut our own domestic pipelines, while then allowing pipelines, say the Nord Stream 2, the Russia's pipeline, to move forward. Then you're going to see increase in gas prices. Every inflation that you are seeing on every product is directly a cause of the decisions that the Democratic leadership in Washington has made.
Let me ask you, too, about their reports this morning, and these are just starting to trickle out. So if you haven't heard about it, I apologize in advance, but that Behind the scenes, because of Omicron and the pandemic, behind the scenes, they're starting to have some conversations between Republicans and Democrats about more stimulus. Have you heard anything about this? And I know that you're not back in D.C. yet, but have you heard anything about these possible discussions about more stimulus to deal with COVID and Omicron?
I haven't heard any more discussions about that. The Democrats, of course, still want to push forward on this another socialist plan for another $4 to $5 trillion in stimulus to the country. But Republicans don't support that. Not a single Republican voted for that when that bill passed the House. But Pelosi's trying to still do some type of negotiation with Manchin in the Senate for him to support that bill to get it passed. But outside of another COVID stimulus, I haven't heard any reports of that. And I don't think at this point Republicans would support that.
Okay.
I hope they wouldn't support that.
Okay. Real quick before I let you go, what's the number one thing on your agenda when you go back to Washington?
Fight against all these socialist progressive policies that the Democrats continuing to force onto our country that has gotten us into the place that we are right now. Record high inflation, people spending more money just going to the gas pump and going to the supermarket than they ever have in the last 30 years. And it's important that we fight and stand up for conservative values. And that's what I'll be fighting for in Washington next week.
All right. We will see you there. Hope you'll make it. Hope you can get a flight, Congressman. Get your snow boots out before you head back.
Yeah, exactly.
Congressman Greg Steube, it's good to see you. Thank you, Congressman.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, coming up, the changing face of business.